Hi Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I want you to be more confident in the kitchen and embrace a positive relationship with food. Now I am a chef, not a dietitian or nutritionist, but a lot of people still ask me about healthy suggestions and things like that around food. And I am not here to shame anybody about the choices that they make about their food. I wholeheartedly believe that each of our own relationships with food is super personal and we should do what is best for us based on our internal cues and not external messaging. So I am not going to be here to tell you you should do this or you shouldn't do that or anything. I think that we each get to make those decisions for ourselves, by ourselves. However, I did want to record this video, and if you clicked on the title thinking, inaccurate calorie counting, wait, is she gonna tell me the most accurate way to do this? You're wrong. Sorry, that's not what I'm gonna be doing today in today's video, but I am going to look at things from very much food science perspective and explain why there is no truly accurate way to count calories. And again, I don't want to shame anybody who decides to do this, but I just want to bring awareness to the realities within the food industry and realities around like the nutritional makeup of our food. And maybe you'll leave this video considering the amount of time and energy you put into this, and if you're happy with how inaccurate your calculations will be. So if you have any questions about anything I'm going over, please ask in the comments. I don't want to get too deep into the details of all of the nitty-gritty science because I think I might lose a lot of you. So I'm going to move through it pretty quickly, but if there's any topic that you feel like I just glazed over and didn't go in depth enough, let me know, because I can always make more videos more fully explaining any topics that you feel like you need more information on. Again, I just want to give you an overview and an understanding to really just add more context to this phrase we hear a lot about counting calories. And I also want to say a calorie is not inherently good or bad, and there are no such things as like good calories versus bad calories. A calorie is simply a measurement of energy. A calorie is just a system of measurement. It's a way to measure energy, so it is not good or bad. It is a neutral thing. So two of the tools that a lot of people will use when trying to count calories is the nutrition data sheet label, which is on all packaged foods and is required to be on packaged foods per the FDA. And then the other tool is typically like an online tool or an app, tracking app of some kind, where you can find out the nutritional breakdown of fresh produce, packaged foods, and sometimes even like dishes at restaurants based on how many locations the restaurant has, right? A couple years ago, they required that large chains have to start breaking down the calorie counts of their dishes. So none of these tools are really super duper accurate. I'm going to start with the nutrition data sheet label that is on all packaged foods. So all of these numbers correspond with the net weight on the package. And you'll see this on every packaged food that you purchase that has an NDS. Somewhere on the package there will also be a net weight. That net weight can have a 20% range. So it can be up to 20% heavier than the stated label weight or lighter. And when I say it, I mean like the actual product inside of the packaging. And the reason why there is a 20% range is because if we had to have everything so specific, then there would be a bunch more food waste and all of our costs would go way up. Manufacturers do their best to be as consistent as possible, but that 20% allows a range so that you aren't throwing away like 75% of the stuff that you make because it's just slightly too heavy or just slightly too light. So because the numbers here are based on this number, if this number does not accurately represent what is truly inside the package, then these numbers won't be an accurate representation either. And now 20% isn't that big of a deal, but it is just good to know that it is inaccurate. If you are somebody who relies on insulin or other health implications from these labels, then it can be really, really important to keep in mind that there can be some variability to the reality versus what is stated on the side, and that is why a lot of times it will be recommended to take your time to understand how your body is interacting with the insulin and everything, and each body's response is different, and every single person's health is different. All right, so then the online tools like the tracking apps, those will have your information for fresh produce. And like I said, also like meals at restaurants. And I'm honestly not even going to get into the inaccuracies on that, because unless a chain restaurant is preparing something in a manufacturing facility and shipping food to the restaurants to just like basically open a box, microwave it and go, there's always going to be some variability to how that food is prepared. You know, you can have recipe sheets for people to follow, but there's going to be some variety. So the calorie counts at restaurants, everything I'm saying here is going to apply to that, plus another like method of production variability added on top of it. That's all I'm going to say about that, so that this isn't a 45-minute video. Okay, so if you are wanting to look up the nutritional value of fresh produce, you may get the results stated in an as in each. So one avocado has X amount of grams of fat, etc. Or you may see it based on grams. So for each gram of avocado that you eat, you can expect X amount, like percent of that to be certain nutrients. Even if you go with the grams, you're still going to see some inaccuracy. But first, I do want to talk a little bit about the each. So these two avocados that I just randomly grabbed are different sizes, different shapes, which the shape doesn't have as much to do about it with it, but this one is heavier. Like I can just feel this avocado is heavier. So these two avocados are not going to have the exact same nutritional breakdown. And that's okay, because they're living organisms. And of course they're not going to have this exact same breakdown. It's just like you and me. Our bodies are going to be different. So our health is different, right? Every single person's health is so individual and so unique. And that is how organisms, living organisms, always are. Everyone is unique. So within each type situation, the sizes and the densities can of course be very different. But even if we go and we want to break it down by gram for gram, there can still be differences within the same food. So some of the factors that can change the nutritional breakdown of what a fresh produce item may be compared to its counterpart would be the growing conditions, potentially like how much rain they got or how regularly the produce was watered as it was grown, when it was picked in its ripeness level, how ripe it is when you are eating it, and how much moisture is actually in that fruit. So as fruit ripens, it converts starches into sugar. So you may have had this experience where you eat a strawberry and it's a little sour and tart, and then 3 days later you eat another strawberry from that same package, or maybe you went and picked some strawberries at the farm from your batch. You eat one a couple days later and it's a lot sweeter. Well, as it is sitting, the starch is being converted into sugar. So that will change. the fiber in your fruits and vegetables can change over time with ripeness. And then with the moisture, think about a fresh bell pepper versus one that's maybe you bought like last week at the store. You know how sometimes it kind of gets wrinkly? It's not quite mushy yet, but just like wrinkly. That is a sign of a loss of moisture. And so these tracking tools, they've figured out an average. So for banana, they're gonna come up with some type of average to use for the nutrients that are in that banana. But that will not accurately reflect the exact banana that you have in front of you. And this, again, is not so much about everything has to be perfectly, exactly accurate and, oh no, things, like it's bad that things are inaccurate. That's not what I'm saying. I think that this really is about the mindset of living organisms are all going to be different and unique. And we can't expect to fit complex fruits and vegetables and meats and plants and fungi and all kinds of living organisms. We can't expect them to follow a black and white, like this is the exact number that will represent it. Just like people. We're all unique, we're all different. And so whenever we can embrace the individuality and understand the fact that this is food and there is going to be a lot of variability, then you start to understand how black and white thinking around food can be so inaccurate overall. So it's not just in the calorie itself, but it's in thinking about food in a black and white way instead of a complex, nuanced, like myriad of colors under the rainbow sort of way. All right, so talked about how the numbers in the tools that we have to use are inaccurate for what the food is that we are actually eating. Now I want to talk about a little bit about how those numbers were calculated, and let you in on a little bit of the inaccuracies in that process. So it's going to be a very short history lesson here. Stick with me. I will keep it as short as I can while giving you the information you need. In the late 1800s, Dr. Atwater was interested in calculating the caloric value of different foods. And his goal in doing this was to figure out what is the food that will provide the most energy for the cheapest, like, financial cost. Think about, famines were still very much a part of a concern in global health. So he was doing this research and trying to focus on this caloric value of foods from a very macro perspective around how could we sustain a population. He never had the goal of iterating individual dietary guidelines or health advice from these numbers. So it was a very scientific, macroeconomic type perspective. And so the numbers that he came up with are called the Atwater system, and it's what we still use today. And you may or may not be familiar with that name, but as I rattle off these numbers, these might start to sound a little bit more familiar to you. So this is the system that says that 1 gram of fat will give your body 9 calories worth of energy, and 1 gram of protein or carbohydrates will provide 4 calories of energy for your body. That system. So how did he come up with those numbers? Well, the answer is poop. Literally. So I really don't want to get, elbows deep into this, and I don't think that you will want to hear every detail of these experiments, so I'm going to way oversimplify it, but what he did is he would take a food, so let's say a strawberry, we'll go back and use that example again, and he would put it in a high pressure airtight container with pure oxygen, and he would burn that food. He would measure how much heat that food gave off when it was burnt. Then he would have his test subjects eat that food, and he would take their fecal matter and burn that and see how much heat that provided. And the difference of the two is what he deemed the body had absorbed. So what are the problems with this? Well, number one, our bodies are not closed systems of pure oxygen. Our digestive systems are incredibly complex, and they also depend on other very complex systems in our bodies. Our bodies are not airtight, high pressure systems of pure oxygen. So the fact that the food would give off a certain amount of heat, which was measured as a calorie, in like calories, in this container, doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it would work in our bodies. You know, he's a scientist, he's looking at this from the very scientific angle. You gotta control as much as you can control and you know, limit the variables if possible. And to be fair, like our human bodies, there's a lot of variables, and amongst all of us, there are a lot of variables. So like my body is changing every single day, your body is changing every single day, and guess what? Our two bodies are gonna be different. So I get it, that makes it pretty hard to study anyway. But even past comparing the systems, the test subjects were only allowed to eat that one food. So for the strawberry example, the person would have only been eating strawberries. And realistically, that's not how we eat. We don't just eat one single type of food day in and day out. And the different foods that we eat interact with each other, and certain nutrients help other nutrients get absorbed by our bodies. Additionally, our endocrine system, our hormones, have a huge impact on our digestion and how things are absorbed, like nutrients are absorbed. As our bodies age and change, that affects the absorption of nutrients. What kind of medications we may be taking affects that. And our environment, the environment that we're in, the amount of stress that we're under, will change the way that nutrients are absorbed, the amount of water that we have consumed. Or if we have consumed things that don't agree with our body, or like alcohol is also gonna have an effect. So there are many factors that affect how your body specifically is going to metabolize and absorb various nutrients in food. So on different days, different times of the day, based on different things we've eaten, based on our stress levels, based on our exercise levels, based on our body's hormone changes, our bodies are going to absorb more or less of different nutrients. And so whenever you start with information that does not necessarily accurately represent the food, plus you try to assume that you know what your body is or is not going to absorb without actually, knowing what's going on, there's a lot of inaccurate numbers that we're making assumptions are accurate. So that is why it's impossible to accurately count calories, because we just don't have enough information. And even if we did have the most accurate information on our packaged foods or in a tracking app for fresh produce, we still don't know exactly what's happening in our bodies every second of every day. And we don't know exactly how our bodies are absorbing certain nutrients. So if you are putting a lot of time and energy into tracking these numbers, knowing that they'll never perfectly reflect the reality, is that time that you still want to be spending. And maybe it is. And each person is more than welcome to make that decision for themselves. I just want to bring some awareness to the realities of it, because I feel like in diet culture, a lot of times we are made to believe that counting calories is the right way to lose weight or be healthy or something like that. And I believe that the amount of stress that it can cause somebody can be much more unhealthy than any food choices that they you may naturally be wanting to make. And I will add one more thing, but I'm not going to get too deep into it on this video because I think this is already like over 15 minutes long. But you may be saying, okay, all of those numbers based on grams and whatnot are not the most accurate, but there's this handy dandy percent daily value on these labels here. So could I use that to inform some of my food decision making? I'll do another video talking about some of the inaccuracies and misrepresentations that those numbers have. Okay. So these labels were designed to be communication tools, but not to give hard, fast, individual health advice. And I think that sometimes we use them in ways that they weren't exactly intended to be used. So stick around if you want to learn more about the nitty-gritty of like the nutrition data sheet. I know it sounds super fun. And just some things to keep in mind whenever you are reading that sheet so that you can make more informed decisions for your health. And I always believe that incorporating joy around food is one of the most healthy ways to eat and live your life. I mean, if you're always stressed around food, we eat multiple times a day, and it's just not ideal to have that much stress around food when you could be really enjoying food. And so that's why I am a huge proponent of eating what you want to eat, enjoying the food, not restricting yourself, and not adding any more stress than you need. Our lives are stressful enough with everything else, so I love having a relationship with food that brings more joy, more confidence, and more creativity. And if you are someone who wants more confidence in the kitchen and maybe help with your weekly meal plans, join us at Chef It's Table. I will send you dinner recipes along with shopping lists every Friday night, and these dinner recipes are not like the same to everybody. I ask you about your personal preferences, your family's flavor preferences, how often you like to cook each week, and I send you my recipes that actually fit your lifestyle. So head over to Chef It's Table if you want to get started today, and follow along for more videos about kitchen confidence and having a healthy, positive relationship with food. Thank you, Chefeteers.